So welcome to Taking the Tradition On, Series 5, Soul Stories. So there's going to be a little bit more storytelling as well as our usual conversation in this series. As always, I've got a few people that I need to thank at the beginning. Firstly, to my amazing patrons who enable this to happen. I'm so grateful to you, and it's great to have some of you in the room tonight. It's lovely to see you. Always a pleasure to have all of your comments and conversation throughout the month, not just for the Taking the Tradition On night itself. And if you'd like to join my marvelous patrons, it's just Amy Douglas at Patreon. Easy to find. Thank you very much to Get a Word in Edgeways. You'll see when I write things, it comes up with their little logo. This is Get a Word in Edgeways' posh Zoom webinar account that they let me borrow to use for taking on the tradition. So they had a fabulous festival last month. I think there's some highlights up on their website if you want to check some of that out. And thank you very much for the use of the Zoom. Now, in this series, I am inviting eminent storytellers to tell their soul stories, stories that have become part of them, stories that have stayed with them on their journey as a storyteller, that have influenced them as a storyteller and as a person. Those stories that they've had a relationship with over a period of time, with that back and forth conversation over years, and to tell us some or all of that story, and to explain to us why it's had such an impact on their life. And tonight, my storyteller is coming from Washington, DC. Babasi is a poet, a griot, a master storyteller. He's a creative force of nature. He is an ambassador, mentor, father, teacher, motivator, community artist. And he's got a career that's been spanning over 4 decades. I was lucky enough to meet him fairly recently in his career at the World Storytelling Festival, the International Storytelling Festival in Morocco, which sprang out of the World Storytelling Cafe. Babasi has always been hugely involved in youth work, and now is one of the leading voices really in the World Storytelling Cafe, and runs a regular international storytelling session for youngsters on there, which is amazing, bringing youngsters from all over the world, from really different backgrounds, to be able to meet each other and share both their traditional and their personal stories. And it's just an absolutely fantastic space, and I highly recommend it if you ever want to go and join in with that. But tonight we are going to be discussing Babasi's soul story. So I'm going to ask you to put your virtual hands together, go wild on the chat, to introduce Babasi, to tell us what his soul story is. Welcome, Babasi. Whoop, 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 whoop. Babasi is in the house. Welcome.
Babasi is in the house, the house. Thank you for that very, thank you for that introduction. Yeah, thank you. Almost left me speechless. I'm like, who's she talking about? Oh, that's me.
If you are speechless, that would be a first.
Indeed.
I don't believe it.
Yo, David Thompson, that's cuz my fellow American storyteller. He's on the other side of the United States. I'm on the East Coast. He's on the West Coast. But the art of storytelling, the magic of storytelling, we're always together. So thank you, cuz. Thank you for that shout out. Yeah. So it's an honor to be here. Meeting you in Marrakesh was a treasure. It was a pleasure. It was one of the reasons why I was supposed to be in Marrakesh, meeting you and your fabulous daughter.
Well, I have to say, I mean, I'm looking at the people who are in live tonight. Obviously, there'll be, and there's lots of people who'll be watching this a little bit later on. But there's quite a few people in tonight who were in Marrakesh, who've come because they want to come and share this evening with you and find out more about you. So we got to hear quite a lot of your stories. But what have you picked? I mean, there's one story that we're going to focus, or one genre anyway, that we're going to focus on tonight. So tell us, which stories, well, I think stories rather than story, have you chosen that have just had a huge impact on your life that you want to spend this hour focusing on?
I would say the Anansi stories. Anansi, well, it's interesting because the more I got into Anansi, the more I began to study, and I began to, as some people would say, retrofit. I began to reverse trace him. He's Anansi in many parts of Africa. He's Anansi when you get to the various islands from Jamaica to Trinidad to Barbados, and then it becomes Aunt Nancy when you get to the southern parts of the United States, because Anansi and Aunt Nancy, or Anansi, Aunt Nancy, he's a very fascinating character, often referred to as trickster. I refer to him as teacher and trickster because through his adventures and misadventures, you learn what to do and what not to do. So to me, he is a very interesting microcosm of the many aspects of human nature. And he's just fascinating. Sometimes he's the hero, sometimes he's the villain, sometimes he's just sometimes. But he's had that effect on me. I like the various lessons, everything from when Anansi had all the wisdom in the world, stories such as Anansi and how the spider became bald, uh, how the spider got a thin waist. They're all stories that teach us about behavior, teach us about how to be good, better people, teach us about the things we shouldn't do. There's no saying treat people the way you want to be treated. And through Anansi, we can find nuggets of that. Treat people the way you want to be treated. And what goes around comes around.
So will you tell us one? Give us an example. Tell us an Anansi story. I'm gonna spotlight you, and we just want to hear one and hear your
All right.
take on one of the Anansi stories.
Usually when I tell Anansi stories, or when I tell stories, I begin with a long, drawn out, long time ago. Unfortunately, on the device I'm using, if I do that, it will mute out the sound, and all you'll get is, and that's a bit much.
And it
But
won't be me. It won't be me pressing the button and shutting. I'm not going to use that power.
well, I'm going to say long, 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 long time ago. So long ago, if you take the age of everybody who is witnessing this event and add it all up and double it, it was longer than that. Anansi, in many parts of Africa, the spider can grow to be bigger than Baba C's hand. And that's pretty big, but it is small compared to the gorilla. And I know what you're saying. The word is not gorilla. But if I ever saw anything that big and ugly coming after me, I go real fast to get away from it. He is not fast like the cheetah. Why they call it the cheetah when he don't do it, I don't know. And he cannot fly like the birds. Oops, watch out for them birds. But Anansi must use him brains. He must use him brains. He must use his cunning in order to survive, in order to live day to day. But you see, a long time ago, when there are only 4 days in a week, all people could do was work and work and work and work some more. That's right. Work and work and work and work some more. And the only relief they got from working was sometimes when Inyame, the sky god, would come down from heaven, not heaven, heaven. He would come down from heaven and he'd open his box of stories and share them with the people in the world. And then when he's finished sharing the stories, he put them all back in the box and go all the way back up to heaven. And people would have to return to working. One day Anansi said, I don't like to work. I want to tell these stories. And if I own all these stories, that's all I could do. I just tell these stories. So Anansi spun himself a web all the way to heaven, 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 all the way to heaven. Bam! And when he got to heaven, he called Inyame's name. He said, Inyame, May, May, Inyame, May, May. And Inyame heard him calling. You know how sometimes you have to have that one person in your life who works your last nerve, whose voice you don't want to hear, whose presence you don't want to share? That was Anansi to Inyame. Inyame said, Who calls my name? It is me, Anansi. What do you want this time, little man? Hey, I was down on the earth and I was thinking, it's not fair that we only hear the stories when you come down to earth. So I was thinking, you owe me lots of favors. So I want you to give me all the stories in the world and you owe me no more favors. Oh, You're serious. I tell you what, you do me three small favors and you can have all the stories in the world. Just three small teensy weensy favors. And as you know, anytime anyone asks you to do anything that's teensy weensy as a favor, it is anything but teensy weensy. He said, bring me the leopard with the terrible, terrible teeth. Bring me the hornet with the sting like fire. And bring me Watsy, the fairy that no man can see, and you can have all the stories. So Anansi went back down to the earth and he started thinking. And he ran into the leopard. He said, hey, Jumbo leopard. And the leopard said, Jumbo, see Jumbo, Anansi. He said, would you like to play a game? What kind of game could I play with you? We could play the binding game. Oh, yes, let's play the binding game. The binding game. What's the binding game? Well, you see, I take these vines, I throw them over the branch, and I bind you by the foot, and I swing you back and forth and back. And then after a while, we switch places and you swing me back and forth and back. It's a lot of fun. You must try it. Oh, yes, well, I'll go first. And so Anansi threw the vines over and he bind him by the foot. And Leopard was having a good time. Wee, wee. Okay, it's my turn. Let me down. And he was thinking to himself, but when you let me down, I'm going to have the snack. And I said, nope, I think I'll leave you there. You're ready for the Sky God. Let me down. Nope. And I said, now how am I going to get the hornet? He filled a gourd. It's kind of like a pumpkin, filled with water, and he had some palm leaves. He found a hornet's nest, and he threw all the water on the hornet's nest. And the hornets came out and said, what's going on? Why are we getting wet? He said, oh, it's raining. What are we going to do? He said, well, why don't you get inside this gourd? I'll put the palm leaves on it and keep you dry. And so they all went inside. Buzzy, 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 buzz, buzz, buzz. Buzzy, 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 buzz, buzz, buzz. And they went inside the gourd, and he stuffed it shut with the palm leaves. And after a while, they said, is it still raining outside? Is it still raining outside? Answer us. Let us out. Nope. Got you ready for the Sky God. Now, how is he going to get Watsy, the fairy that no man can see? So he decided to make himself a gum baby. And he made himself a gum baby, not a dumb baby, but a gum baby. Made himself a gum baby. And he took a web and he took it to the back of the gum baby's head. So when he pulled it, it would do like this and like that. So it was naughty. And then he fixed a hot bowl full of yams with honey and butter. And he put it in the middle of the forest because he knew that Watsy loved to eat yams. And he knew that Watsy loved to dance. And sure enough, she smelled the yams and she was dancing, but she couldn't see that. And she saw the gum baby. She said, gum baby, may I have some of your yams? And he pulled on the thread, and the gum baby nodded yes. Of course, they couldn't answer because it was a gum baby, not a dumb baby, but a gum baby. And so Watsy only meant to eat some of the yams, but they're so good. She ate them all. Gum baby, I did not mean to eat all the yams. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Gum baby didn't say anything because it's a gum baby. Not a dumb baby, but it's a gum baby. Couldn't answer. He said, answer me. I just spoke to you. When your elders speak, you must answer. Gum baby don't say anything. She said, if you don't answer me, I'll give you such a smack. And she smacked it. And her hands got stuck because the gum baby is made of gum. She smacked it again. The gum baby started shaking back and forth. She let me go, and she kicked it until she was stuck to the gum baby. And Anansi said, now you're ready for the Sky God. So he took the hornets, he took the cheetah, who don't cheat, and he took Watsy, the fairy that no man can see, and went all the way back to heaven. Inyame was laughing. I'll never see this. I'll never see. And there he was. But Sky God, being the Sky God of his word, clapped his hands once, Watsy went away. Clapped his hands twice, hornets went away. Clapped his hands 3 times, leopard went away. And he gave all the stories to Anansi. And Anansi spun a web back down to earth and opened up the chest of stories and did something very unusual for Anansi. He let all the stories go, but he didn't bother to collect them again. And the stories multiplied. It begat dancing and begat singing and begat, they were begatting all over the place. And that's why today we have motion pictures, we have spoken word, we have poetry, we have literary classics and all that kind of stuff, all because Anansi shared the stories with the world. And that's how Anansi once owned all the stories of the world, but gave them to the world to be enjoyed. Asante. Oops, I stepped on a pen, the pen bent, and that's the way that story went. Asante. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you. Well, he did give all the stories away, but I suppose that's the thing is he also kept them, didn't he? I mean, that's how we know about Anansi.
Right.
Because
Well, he's probably bragged about how he gave all the stories away. You know, that story used to belong to me, but I gave it away because I'm such a nice guy.
well, and he's still in it. You know, it's still his story. We tell it,
Yes.
but it's his story. Was 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 that the first Anansi story that you heard?
No, probably the first story, Anansi story I heard was probably how Anansi had all the wisdom. Again, involving the sky god. The sky god gives him all the wisdom. He goes back down to earth. He has all he tells Anansi, wherever you see wisdom, pluck it, put it inside the calabash, and it's yours forever. And soon everybody was walking around going, duh. I was going to say something or do something, but I forgot what it was. And he had all the wisdom in the world. He was the wisest person in the world. And you thought he would be happy, but he wasn't because Anansi's a lazy fellow, and he had to carry the wisdom with him. And it talks about how he climbed a tree, the tallest of tall trees, to hide the wisdom. But and climbing the tree, he kept falling down. His son Kwaku said, "Father, Baba, what are you doing?" He says, "It's none of your business. You're a child. Go away." He says, "But I surely I can tell you how to get the wisdom to get that calabash to the top of the tree. You are a child. You can tell me nothing." Anyhow, his son tells him how to get the calabash to the top of the tree. And now says, "Go away. Stop spying your father. Go away. You're a child. Children know nothing." And he does exactly what his son tells him to do, gets to the top of the tree, and he's angry. He's mad. He's not happy because a child told him how to get to the top of the tree. And he takes the calabash and twirls it around and around and around and throws it up in the air, and it comes down with a mighty crash, and all the wisdom escapes. And people come around, they grab wisdom. Some get it in their feet, become dancers. Some get it in their hands, become scribes and artists. Some get it in their eyes, become astronomers. Some get it in their brains, become teachers and parents. Some get it in a very peculiar place and become politicians. But that's another story. And at the end of the story, the son says, "Baba, I don't understand. Why did you throw it away?" He said, "I, Anansi the spider, had all the wisdom in the world, but I was not wise enough to think about tying the calabash to me back and using all 8 of my magnificent limbs to climb the tree. I did not deserve the wisdom. I had to learn from a child who knows nothing." And he and Kwaku, his son, went off into the forest and had many, many other adventures. But that was probably my first story about Anansi.
And have you always known them? I mean, did you grow up learning them, or did you suddenly? Was there a moment where you kind of went, "I did not know about these stories," and
I
they
learned
suddenly
about Anansi
landed?
probably back in the 70s. Um, when I met a gentleman a young man from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and his name was Yubu Bakari Kamau, who came to Washington, D.C. to start a Afrocentric. Notice I said Afrocentric, not Afrocentric, because the continent is called Africa, not Afroca, although an Afro is a nice hairstyle. But he wanted to do an Afrocentric theater company. And in the process of discovering how to do things that reflected the culture and the heritage, rediscovered the rich art of storytelling. And Anansi and King John Silver were among the first characters that we discovered. And when I learned about Anansi, it was love at first tale. It was fascinating. I started learning, and I'm still learning Anansi tales.
And so it sounds like you have a really clear memory. And so that was kind of when you first discovered storytelling, then, and kind of
Uh,
had you.
a lot of things were happening in the 70s. And in the 70s, I was known as that poet that acts out his stuff. I was a spoken word artist before we had the word spoken word artist, the phrase that is. And actually, I was a poet and an actor. In 1976, I was down at the Smithsonian Institute. One of the largest museum complexes in the world, and every year they have what they call the Folklife Festival on the National Mall. And there were 3 gentlemen in a little make two shanty, and there were 2 white guys and a black guy. And it's important that I point out that only one was black because every time he would tell the story, I said, he sounds like my Uncle Charles. It was my Uncle Charles. And my Uncle Charles would tell these stories, and I'm like, wow. And that was in 1976. In 2012, I had the honor of being the storyteller for the Folklife Festival for the Smithsonian Institute on the National Mall. And I discovered that I'm at least a third generation storyteller. So yeah, all that kind of fell into place. Discovering my storytelling roots, so to speak, my actual personal storytelling roots on my father's side, uh, having this theater company evolve that would travel throughout the country and tell stories about Anansi, King John Silver, Royal Rabbit, Royal Fox, all types of characters. Um, so it was quite a dynamic time. Still is, but it was quite a dynamic time.
So how did you get there? Because, there you are swimming around in all sorts of spoken words, kind of rediscovering your roots, discovering storytelling, but you grew up not particularly knowing about storytelling and going to be an oceanographer.
Yes, I was going to. Yes, I have always been fascinated by science, and as a little child, or as I say, when I was pretending to be a child, um, I just knew I was going. I knew what field I was going to science. I was going to be an oceanographer. I wanted to be the first Black oceanographer to go to sea and come back to tell about it, because you just didn't hear about Black oceanographers. And then one day, while walking across the campus of Howard University, I had an epiphany or nervous breakdown. We're going to go with the epiphany. And it said, "You're not going into science." I said, "Well, I'm not." "Well, what am I going to do?" "You're going to use your words." Well, my father was almost a lawyer. My mother was a teacher. And I didn't want to do either of those because I knew if I chose lawyer or teacher, if I chose one over the other, the parent whose profession I didn't choose was going to be upset. I didn't want to do all that. And I was too honest to be a politician. No disrespect meant. It said, "You're going to use your words." So I studied television and radio broadcasting, and became a community actor and an activist, and started using theater as my platform. And from there it grew and grew and grew, and from actor to poet that acts out his stuff to storyteller. And it's been, oh, I got to tell you something, because you asked me when did I first start telling stories. According to my mother, I came out of the womb telling stories. I was being interviewed by a Canadian news outlet, and my mother was sitting in the audience after the show, because she was my ride that day, and she was my transportation that day. And I happened to let it slip that she was in the audience. And the interviewer said, "Well, call her up, call her up." So she came up on the stage. He started interviewing her. I said, "Oh, this has become my mother's interview, not mine, but that's okay." And my mother said, "When did he start telling stories?" My child, my child, when he was born, didn't have a tooth in his mouth. And he came out going, "Yama, yama, 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 yama. Yama, 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 yama." Not a tooth in his mouth. And a doctor picked him up. And back in the day when babies were born, they spank him on the popo to make him take that first breath of fresh air. And the doctors held my child up upside down. They spanked him on the popo, but not to make him cry. They went, "Shut up, shut up, shut up." My baby boy hanging upside down going, "Yama, yama, 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 yama," looked up at the doctor and said, "Actually, that was not necessary." So according to my mom, I came out telling stories. And I had a very vivid imagination as a child.
So all the spoken words, all the words in the world, but it is Anansi that you keep coming back to. And
Because
so
Anansi,
I know,
Anansi reflects so much of us. The beautiful thing about animal stories is that animals reflect certain aspects of human behavior. And you can tell an animal story about somebody who you might know personally, but you never say their name. You talk about an animal, and they can't get upset because you don't say their name. You're talking about an animal, and why are you getting upset? "Honey, did I say your name? Then I can't be talking about you now, can I?" But Anansi has so many variations. So many different aspects of human behavior that he's just wonderful. Just like he has 8 legs, he has more legs than humans. He has more aspects than humans.
but yeah, but you also were talking about how that's the thing is they're teaching stories, aren't they? And they're role model stories, and they are absolutely stories that are designed to teach you how to be in the world, how to and how to use your brain, how to think. They are about wisdom, they are about stories, they're about using what you've got up there. And like you were saying at the beginning, he's a really small animal, not like a gorilla. I think I would go really fast if I saw a gorilla as well. And I know that you do an awful lot of teaching, and you've done that in formal education settings. You're still doing it now with the World Storytelling Cafe, but you've also taken young people on the road, and you've worked with them and kind of taken them to gigs and really kind of supported people through their own careers and particularly through those difficult teenage years. And a lot of people shy away from working with teenagers. There are some people who are really good at it, but I mean, I know a lot of storytellers who kind of get a bit about teenage times. And I'm wondering if that kind of interest in Anansi stories and that work with teenagers have really kind of worked well hand in leg, you know, kind of those 8 legs. You need 8 legs, I think, to work with teenagers, or 8 hands to kind of keep on top of everything.
It's interesting that you asked that question because I've always liked working with children. And one of the things that kept me very involved with the various organizations, schools, community organizations, um, uh, place, houses of worship, et cetera, was that when they asked me, well, what is your favorite age group? I'd say prenatal to ancestors. And teenagers, I was not smart enough to know that you weren't supposed to work with teenagers. And so I used to have a very active group called Tomorrow's Voices, Tomorrow's Voices Apprentice and Leadership Workshops. And out of that, we had Tomorrow's Voices performing um, um, performance program. And they were tweens and teens that traveled with me, and they played various musical instruments, they danced, they did spoken word, they learned stories, and they were always fascinating. They helped me teach African games. In fact, they were a large part of my workshop, and they were so good that I was able to get some of them paid during the summer. We have a summer program called SYEPs, Summer Youth Employment Program, and they got paid. And the director of the program said, "Listen, when your 2 hours are up, when you've done your workshop, your kids can go home." I said, "Oh no." He said, "No, they can go home. They were supposed to work, depending on the age, 4 to 6 hours." She says, "No, they do more in 2 hours than most of my staff does in 6. But even if they go home early, all the field trips we have, they're welcome to come. They don't have to pay for anything. We got them covered." Now I mention all that because I had a few who were like, "No, man, it's summer. I'm not learning anything new." And my guys would say, "Well, then you can't hang with us because we learn something new every day." It's keeping them engaged, challenging them to use their brains and their imagination. And they stepped up to it. In fact, a lot of them, when they grew, they had the nerves to grow up. But when they would go away to college or move across the country, they would come back during the summer and help me teach the new crop of Tomorrow's Voices. So it was always interesting and engaging. And I didn't know you weren't supposed to work with teenagers, but they didn't give me a difficult time. In fact, if anything, every now and then you get the little smart aleck who thinks they're going to, they're going to show the old head how it's done. And the kids would say, "No, man, no, he's nice, he's kind. That's not a weakness. You're not going to ruin it for us. So, you know, if you're not going to ruin it for us." And I had one occasion where they said, "Bubba, see, can we take him out in the hall and talk?" And I said, "Talk?" They said, "Yeah, we just need a couple of minutes to tighten him up." Tighten him up can mean a lot of different things on how it's said. And when they brought him back, he profusely apologized for his rudeness and his disrespect. I don't know what they did to him. I didn't see any bruises. I didn't see no broken bones. So I guess they had a pretty good talk. And he turned out to be one of my best participants. So yeah, working with it, I often find with teenagers, what they're looking for is someone who gets them, and they often tell me I get them, but I tell them that's because I've been your age. You haven't been mine. And someone who keeps them engaged, who challenges them, and hopefully that's what I do.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And the thing is, I mean, teenagers, I think, get a bad rap. I have my own personal teenagers now, and but I mean, I've had great times with teenagers as well. Teenagers are just people. Some are rubbish, and some are really amazing, and a lot. But as with most people, it's a lot about what you put on in, you get out. And if you treat somebody warily, and if you're scared of them, then they're probably not going to relate terribly well to you. And there's a lot of things about how to teach teenagers, but it's really fantastic when you see programs that are there and things that are are there to support them, because it is a tricky time when you're learning to be an adult, and it's difficult learning to be an adult, and there aren't so many rituals and initiation rites and ways of doing that, I don't think now. But I do think that stories are one of those really essential things about growing up, and that's how I learned how to grow up. I was really lucky. I found storytelling as a teenager, and my teenage years were all about storytelling, and I learned a huge amount about how to be a person from stories. That's how I did it, and I think everybody should do it that way. But that's we all want to give our own experience to other people, don't we? But I do want to. It feels like with the Anansi stories, I wonder if you ever make them up, because it feels like there's amazing Anansi stories that have been handed down. But like you say, there's this whole thing of kind of, do you ever just see a situation and go, hey, you know what, Anansi was doing this one day and kind of this happened, and just retell that situation with a suggested end and a suggested way out?
I have adapted some Anansi stories to meet other things. And only recently have I considered making new Anansi stories. But I want to do them and be true to the Anansi spirit. I want them to come off across as Anansi tales and not necessarily a Baba Sea tale, although sometimes they're the same thing. But yes, I'm exploring that now. And uh, um, for instance, there's a story about Anansi's six children, and I've adapted that and made it a Kwanzaa story. And for those who may not be familiar with Kwanzaa, Kwanzaa is an African American holiday or celebration rather, based on African traditions, including the first harvest. It's 7 days long, and so I've taken that tale and I've given each character, each of his children, an aspect that corresponds with an aspect of Kwanzaa, and so I've adapted it that way. Um, oh, David, cuz I'm missing you already.
Thanks for joining us, David. Lovely to have you with us.
So the amazing thing about Anansi, you know what? Now you give me an idea to do urban tales of Anansi urban tales, because he lends himself to a lot of different situations. So that maybe my next book, because I have a lot of unwritten books in here. Maybe my next published book, because I wrote a play back in 19 called "How the Baboon Got a Shiny Behind" and Other Tales, and it was about African folk tales, and adapted and slightly modified to fit an American audience. Um, but Anansi's a character, and he's a wonderful character, and I love hearing. It's interesting watching the young people I work with take those stories and then tell them as they would tell them. Because the first thing I teach, one of the earliest things I teach is that you don't have to do a story the way I do it. You do it the way you do it, but just be true to the story, and they can be fascinating. Oh, can I say something? It's not exactly it's not Nazi related. It's not a Nazi related, but it is related to working with teens. May I share it real quick? I'll make it short.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm not sure which birthday, but it was my 50th or 50ish birthday, somewhere between 50 and 55. So I used to work with this wonderful group of people at a community, at a community, what? I know what it is, but a community center. And so I usually don't work on my birthday, but I love working with children. And the director said, "Oh, I know your birthday's coming up. Don't worry about coming in. You'll get paid. Just have a day off. Enjoy yourself." I said, "But I love working at the center. I'm gonna take the day off." So one of my kids called Rhythm. I gave all the ones that travel with me had spirit names. And Rhythm, we called him Rhythm because if it had a surface, he could play it. I mean, Rhythm could. I mean, if he could pick up an instrument, he could learn to play it. So one day for Rhythm, he was either a tween or just barely into his teens. He said, "Baba, your birthday's tomorrow. You don't have to come in. I'll teach workshop." Now that was the summer I had 100 kids in one workshop. And I had 100 kids in one workshop because the executive director said, there's only, we have a scheduling problem and there's only one person crazy enough to handle 100 kids at one time, and it's you. Will you do it? And I said, yes. So we had three gentlemen who were from a college who were assigned to work with us. And they came and said, listen, Rhythm really wants to do this for you. We got his back. No one's going to give him a rough way to go. Please say yes and let him do this. I said, okay, but I'm going to come in and witness this. So the next day I came in and I had bought lunch. I bought a little boom box with an earpiece so I could listen to music, bought some books. And I made it very clear that I was not teaching that day, that Brother Rhythm was in charge. And if you had any questions, you had to go to him. And for 2 hours, I watched him teach workshops. They would pull a group of kids out 20 at a time, 10 at a time, bring them back 10 and 20 at a time. And he's teaching workshop. He is doing an excellent job. He's teaching them stories. He's teaching them drumming. He's teaching them teratibu, which is exercise, kind of a type of cross between bootstrap dancing and what the various frats do when they do their step dancing. He's doing all that, and it's wonderful. And I'm eating and reading and watching. I mean, he's magnificent. At the end of the 2 hours, everyone's dismissed. And I tell him, I said, you did a great job. He said, those kids are crazy. They don't want to listen. They don't want to follow instructions. They don't know what to do. I said, welcome to my world, but you still do a great job. So he learned kind of what it was like to be Baba for a day. But I was really fascinated. He actually did a great job, but he wasn't happy because he said they weren't listening. They weren't following instructions. But he did a great job. But I just share that because when you can tell a child, you can tell a teen 1,000 times, but what they're going to do most of the time is follow the example they see you set. And so he was eager to try to do what I do. And he discovered it was not as easy as I make it look. But he did not give up. He gave his best shot. And as far as I'm concerned, not only did he do a great job, it was one of my favorite all-time birthday presents, even till today.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. And I think all of us here kind of know, yeah, it's great to do. It's not easy, but it's rewarding and fantastic to do. But I'm really interested in that as the young generation with the Anansi stories as well, because the Anansi stories, they keep the same heart, but they travel. You get spiders everywhere. I don't know if there's anywhere on Earth that you don't get spiders. I mean, maybe there is, maybe the Antarctic, but I don't know very many places. And they get into all of those nooks and crannies. They find a space for themselves. They adapt. They find a home wherever they go. And you can see the same stories traveling across lots of different places as they've come to America. And I mean, do you feel like they've sort of landed now as Anansi and Aunt Nancy stories? Have they stayed? Do they mostly stay in the past? Because the feel and the heart of the stories seems like you could really easily have Anansi put his black leather coat on and Nancy walks into a bar, he's looking around and there's a big, I can see him really fitting into modern day culture, but I don't know if he does.
I've seen a lot of adaptations of Anansi. Some of them have him dressed in modern clothes, or some of them have him riding in cars. I think Anansi is timeless. I think the essence of his stories are timeless. They can be told yesterday, they can be told today, they can be told tomorrow. And I think what makes them work is the message, the essence, the spirit of the stories. And so that's why when you mentioned Anansi, I said, maybe some deliberate urban Anansi tales are in order. But I've seen short YouTube versions of Anansi. I've seen him from the islands. I've seen him in various countries in Africa. I've seen him through the American South. When I say American, I'm talking about the United States of America. Americans, we often get chastised. There are three countries that make up North America, really, and it's Mexico, United States of America, and Canada. But Americans, for some reason, when we talk about America, we're talking about the United States of America. And so you'll pardon me if I say America and I'm talking about the United States. It's something I'm working on, working my way out of. I'm 71, and that's 71 years of conditioning that I'm learning to uncondition. But he works well. He works well in urban settings and rural settings, in modern times. I think Anansi is timeless.
I think so too, and yeah, and I'd love to hear another story. We've got time for another story, but I'm also I'm throwing this out. So I've got to ask lots of I have got to ask you lots of questions. I've always got more questions, but I did promise to open it up. So, or you keyboard ninjas, if you are burning with questions, if you've got things that you want to ask Babasi, now is the time. Keith is saying, oh, he borrowed your story about Anansi's children and told it to children in Skegness Primary School, and it was well received and enjoyed by all. Thank you so much, and it's great to see you again. So,
Oh, you're too kind. Thank you very, very much. And that's one of the beautiful things about storytelling, is that we're free to we're free to borrow, embellish, and encourage other storytellers to do the same. Someone flashed. Oh, I shouldn't say flash, but someone said, "Do I have a favorite pun?" Yes, my favorite pun is the one I happen to be telling at the time. And some puns are so bad they make you look like you bit into a lemon.
there are some terrible puns. I don't think we're going to go there right now. But don't take me down that route. So there may be some more questions, but I have to admit my question is absolutely, I want to make sure that we have got some good time for another Anansi story, because we can talk about Anansi and talk about Anansi, but the thing is, the stories have been honed over years and years to kind of say in a short time very clearly the things that sometimes we struggle to find the words for. So
Mike asked me a
Mike's
question.
going,
I'm very bad with names, and I don't always remember the names of people I've met. And I've met so many people, so many people, so many people. A lot of
well,
times
I
I
may
have.
be able to help with that. Well, he's asking about Grace Hallworth, and the reason that he's asking, I'm not sure if I've got her Anansi story. Grace Hallworth was a librarian and a storyteller in Britain, somewhere just on that shelf, probably behind Duncan's the special brew, is some of her bits, and I think she wrote a collection of Anansi stories. She wrote Mouth Open, Story Jump Out, and so she wrote quite a few Anansi tales, which I think is maybe why Mike is asking about that. And if you're looking for Anansi stories, then that is actually a written source. She would be a good person to go to.
All right. So that's one of the beautiful things about Anansi tales. You're always learning something new about Anansi.
But that's going and reading some is for a different time. We want to hear one. So yes, please tell us a story, Baba.
I agree, Despina. Anansi's wife does not get enough credit for this for helping him helping him navigate. In fact, a lot of times she's the voice of reasoning, and this story kind of involves her but doesn't involve her. It is a tradition in many African cultures that when a person passes away, a beloved person passes away, to do something and honor them. Some people cut their hair. Some people some people they will give away something that's very dear and near to them. Some people fast, and Anansi's wife, her name keeps changing. Sometimes she's Akua, and her name changes. It depends on the culture or where it's being told. But this is a story about Anansi's actually his wife, his mother-in-law passes away, and she was very loved by the village, and everyone loved her. And they were doing different things, and some people were doing fasts. And Anansi never wants to be outdone by anybody. And Anansi says, I love my mother-in-law. I loved her even more than her own daughter loved her. And I'm going to fast for 30 days. For 30 days, I will not eat anything. No food will pass these lips. And everybody looked at Anansi like he had lost his mind. Everybody knew Anansi couldn't go 3 hours, 3 minutes, he could no. Anansi's three favorite things was to eat, to eat, to eat, and to eat some more. Yes, I know what I just said. His three favorite things was to eat, to eat, to eat, and to eat some more. So people say, "Oh no, Anansi, you don't have to do that." And his wife said, "No, Anansi, you don't have to do that." He said, "No, do not tell me what I do not need to do. I loved her. I loved her. I loved her. And out of respect and honor to her, I will not eat for 30 days." Everybody shook their head because they knew there was no use arguing with Anansi. The first day, Anansi, he was kind of all right. The second day, you could hear his stomach. The third day, he was not pleasant to be around at all, and his stomach was growling so loud people kept looking for the small animal following him. And Anansi was getting hungry. He said, "Anansi, don't tell me what I don't have to do. I will honor it. I said I was not going to eat for 30 days. For 30 days, I will not eat. Leave me alone." And so people started avoiding Anansi. And Anansi's walking around going, "Woe is me. No one loved my mother-in-law more than me. Oh, even though my stomach hurts, I will not eat. I will not eat. I will not eat. I will not eat." And Anansi was walking around, and he came across two ladies stirring a great big calabash, a great big pot of beans. And they were stirring it, and they said, and they would taste it every now and then. "It's not quite right. There's something missing." And Anansi followed this aroma and he saw them. He says, "Oh, those beans, they smell so good. Thank you, Anansi. We would offer you some, but we know you're not going to eat for another 27 days. So we will not tempt you, but there's something missing." He says, "I know there's a patch, there's a garden of herbs. If you follow that path and keep walking, you'll come across a garden of herbs that will go so nice in this great big pot of beans. But Anansi, we keep stirring the beans because we don't want them to burn." "Oh, you can leave that to me." "Oh, no, Anansi, we don't want to tempt you." "Oh, I will not be tempted. I said I will not eat for 30 days. I will not eat for 30 days. "Well, if you're sure." "Yes, I said I'm sure. Yeah, I said, go get the herbs." And so they gave him the big ladle. Some people say ladle, and he started stirring the beans. And they went in there talking, walking in there talking, and he's stirring. And that aroma, oh man, those beans smelled so good. He started salivating. Oh, they smelled so good. And the women were out of sight. They were out of hearing distance. And he said, "Well, maybe just a little taste." And he's smelling it. He's trying to resist. He said, "Well, I'll just have a little bit." And so he takes a ladle and he's beginning to bring it toward his mouth. And just as the beans get to his lips, he hears them coming back. And he doesn't want to be caught. So he snatches off his kufi, stuffs the beans in the kufi, and puts the kufi on top of his head and keeps on stirring. And the ladies come back and they said, "Oh, Anansi, these herbs smell so good. Yeah, it's just what these beans need." And they crush some and they sprinkle it and they started stirring. And the beans are beginning to burn Anansi's head. And he's tugging at it and he's doing a little dance. They said, "What are you doing, Anansi?" He says, "Oh, well, I love my mother-in-law, so I'm dancing out of respect. I'm dancing out of respect to her. In addition to fasting and not eating, I'm doing this little dance." But the beans were burning his head, and he's moving the cap, and he's moving the cap, and he's dancing. And the lady started dancing with him, and he's dancing. And so they're tugging at their lapas, not the lapas, the dress. They're at their headdress, and they're dancing. But soon the pain is so much, he snatches off his kufi, and all of his hair had been burnt away by the hot beans. And they realized what Anansi had done. And they realized what Anansi had done. And Anansi bent his head and went walking down the path in his shame. And to this day, Anansi and his children and his children's children's children and his children's 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 children, they all bear a bald head as a reminder of making promises you cannot keep and being in vain. And the lesson in this story is, do not make promises you cannot keep. And it's not necessary to outdo your neighbor. Mourning is a personal thing, and you pay honor to people by being honorable. Asante.
Oh.
One of my favorite ones, and it always makes me hungry.
Yes, absolutely. It's a fantastic story. and and just yeah, there's hearts and clapping coming up on the chat. Everybody loving that story. And I think that's the thing. There's always just so much heartfeltness. It's funny, but there's always kernels, quite hard kernels of truth in there, and sometimes quite painful lessons. I think certainly painful lesson in that one. Alistair, don't worry. We are. It's time for us to wrap up as well. But safe travels for whatever you need to do for the rest of tonight, today, Alistair.
I'm missing you already, Alistair.
And that is I think that's what Anansi stories do a lot of the time. They sugarcoat painful lessons. They have the painful burning of the head, but they make you laugh while they're doing it. And we are coming up to the end of our time, and I think that is a really it's always good to leave things with a story and to have a story at the end. So lovely to spend an hour with you, Baba, and I knew this would just fly by, this hour. Time talking to you always does just go in a flash, and there's always so much more that we can say. There are many more stories that people can hear you tell. I'm not sure if you've got any performances coming up, but there are certainly lots of your previous sessions recorded on the World Storytelling Cafe site. If you just go to just www.worldstorytellingcafe.com, easy to find. And if they search for Baba C there, they'll find quite a few of your sessions, won't they?
And if I may, they can also do Baba C Storyteller, but you have to do it BABA-C Storyteller, and a lot of things will pop up on there. A lot of good things. If they're not good things, they're not me. Not to be confused with a guy called Baba the Storyteller. He's good, but he's not me. And in the UK, there's a guy called Baba C who spells it CEE, which is what some people in the States did. But now, if you look that up, you'll get him. So I'm Baba C, BABA-C Storyteller, and you get a lot of things. You'll get videos, you'll get YouTube, you'll get pictures, all kinds of good things. And like I said, if they're not good things, they're not me.
And I'll put up links to those as well in the description underneath the video. So the details and the links will be up on there. So this is it for today, but there is much more Baba C in your future, people. Do not worry. And as Richard's saying, there's also a couple of Baba stories up on the House of Stories. I'll put that link up as well. Richard Hamilton does an amazing House of Stories where he's been collecting videos of lots of traditional storytellers from all over the world and putting them up on that site. It's an amazing archive of stories there. So if you have enjoyed tonight, you can see lots more Baba C. And I do taking the tradition on. This is every month except August. We're on our 5th series, amazingly. So there are 4 other series. You can knock yourself out, go and explore the Taking the Tradition YouTube channel. Lots of really amazing people on on a huge variety of different topics, and fantastic conversations to catch up with, all free. And you can follow me, Amy Douglas Storyteller, on Facebook and Instagram. And you will always find the links then to the next Taking the Tradition coming up. The next Taking the Tradition on will be, sorry, I'll let you sit back for a minute, Baba. The next Taking the Tradition on is going to be on the 5th, I believe. Yeah, the 5th of December, Tuesday the 5th of December, Tuesday the first Tuesday of the month. And well, it might be slightly different next month because I think I'm going to have 2 people instead of just one. A fantastic partnership of story, music and folklore that has been going for decades. Incredibly knowledgeable, magical storytelling. It's, if you want to know, it's up on my Patreon site, but it will be out on Facebook and in the Facebook events and on the Taking the Tradition on YouTube site soon. So watch this space. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. Wherever you are in the world, whatever time of day it is, you are always welcome in this amazing online space. I'm going to bring up Baba for one last bow. So thank you very much to all of you for listening, but particularly to my amazing guest, the wonderful Baba C. Woo!